Hi, my name's Jim, and this is Snap Spackle Pop. Somebody told me that there's a holiday coming up. Uh, I don't know exactly what holiday it is. Maybe you can tell. I'm not sure. But today we're going to be doing something a little bit scary, and it's because we're going to use a table saw in a way that we don't usually use a table saw. We're going to make a bowl using the table saw. Now, just as a note of caution, you should always use your tools as the manufacturer recommends them. And you should just watch me do dumb things and not do them yourself. So definitely follow the directions from the manufacturer for any tool that you're going to use. This is just for entertainment purposes, explaining to you what I am doing. And if you want to try that on your own, that is all on you. I wish you the best in your success. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to take this square and we're going to line up the edges like so. Doesn't matter which side we use of the ruler, because we're not measuring anything. We're just using it as a straight edge. And then what that does for us is it gives us the exact center and what we want. So what I did here, just so you can follow along and understand, is I tied a piece of string, or I'm sorry, not thread actually. Spooky red thread. And then I'm just going to tap this in a little bit. And what that does for me is it allows me to put this on a loop like so. And then I can draw the circle that I want to draw. If your kid has a protractor in there from school, then they could use that. But you can see this gives you a very uniform circle, and that's very nice. And that's as simple as that. Then you take that off, and then you're going to cut this on that line. In construction, if you build something that helps you build other things and that thing doesn't move, we call that a fixture. And if you build something and that thing moves and it helps you build other things, we often call that a jig. But to be honest, most people call both of those things a jig, and I will probably be doing the same thing. I don't think I'm going to remember to call it a fixture when it's a jig, or a jig when it's a fixture. They're just all jigs. So what we're going to do is we're basically making a fixture that is thinner than that blank of wood that you cut out in that circle. You need it to be thinner than that thing. So we have a 1.5 inch blank. That circle is 1.5 inches. And therefore your fixture is going to need to be thinner than that in some way. So I would suggest what they call 1x material, which is just a 3/4 inch material. And you could use anything. You could use pressed wood. You could use any material you have laying around. And that's what I did. And you can see that here. So you're going to take that fixture that you've made, that is a circle that is just the size of just so that it fits inside there, your blank fits inside, and you're going to put that right over the blade of the table saw. In fact, I would raise the blade up to the point where it's in so that your fixture sits on top of it so that you know where it's centered. Now, we're not going to run the saw that way, but so that helps you understand where you're putting your fixture. So you're going to put that down, you're going to clamp it down with a couple of clamps on the sides so that it does not move. Now, in order to do this well, you're also going to need to remove the writhing knife, which you should have connected to your table saw. It's a small blade on the back of the saw. In other words, you have this saw blade, and then there's this thing behind it. And if you've ever wondered what that's for, it's actually so that it prevents the wood from binding, it from touching itself on the other side. It keeps the wood spread apart longer so that you have less chance of it binding and then stopping the saw or drawing you into the blade and so on. It's much safer to have the writhing knife connected. But for this particular maneuver that we're doing, we can't have the writhing knife there because it's in the way of the fixture. So the fixture itself and the way that we're doing this actually is what's going to provide you with some amount of safety. And the scary thing about using a table saw to do something like this is eventually your hand is going to be on top of the table saw blade. Not literally, you're going to have 1.5 inches of wood in between you, and you're going to be turning that piece of wood around in a circle. Another thing to remember is that you should mark your blank in one part of the blank so that you know where you've been, so that when you're going around in a circle, if you have a mark there, you know when you get around that you've gone around one time. Now, I also suggest that you mark like a tick mark related to how many times you've gone around, if that's going to be a problem for you to remember how many times you've been around, because every time you go around, while the saw is still running, you're going to turn the crank of your table saw so the blade goes up. You start with it completely flat so that you can't see the blade at all. And you put your piece of wood in the fixture and you turn the table saw on, and then when it's spinning, the blade spins toward you. And when the blade is spinning, and you can hear that, you then will turn it once and spin it. So now that we're done actually cutting the bowl part out of the blank, we're going to sand this thing. And I used what's called a jaw horse. I recently got a used one. And a jaw horse is basically a vise that sits inside a kind of a sawhorse. So that's why they call it a jaw horse. And your foot operates it and makes the back part have pressure on the piece that you're putting in between. And so it holds things really nicely. For my bowl, it held it very tightly when I was doing the sanding. I'm using Spackle, Snap, Spackle, Pop. I'm using Spackle to fill the gaps that are in the bowl. I used a blank that had some holes in it. And so in order to fill those holes, I'm using Spackle. That's a little bit weird. Sawdust and glue is the best thing that you could use to fill most holes in a piece of wood, especially if you're using the sawdust that comes from the species of wood that you are filling. In other words, if it's pine or yellow pine, then you want to use yellow pine for, or use sawdust that is yellow pine and mix that sawdust with wood glue. Now, the main difference between wood glue and regular white glue is that wood glue actually has some additives that help it deal with a variety of kinds of wood. But in reality, you may find that a white glue mixed with sawdust matches the color of the wood more perfectly than yellow glue, because yellow glue will show as yellow. So if you want that glue to show as clear or show the color only of the wood and nothing else, then you might want to use a white glue for that. That's how you make a bowl using a table saw. It was a little scary, but hey, we got through it. That's how you make a bowl with a table saw. I have another video where I show you what I did with my bowl and how I decorated it and what I did with mine. But remember, you can do anything you want with your bowl. And if you have any questions, you can leave those in the comments and I will do my best to answer those, maybe in another video or in the comments themselves. And I want you to remember one last thing, and that's that you should be proud of yourself. You actually made something, and you can do that. You have this ability.